What's going on, Eastern Current fans? We are here with another episode. Excited about tonight's show. Got a great guest on. Before we get started, be sure to go check out Eastern Current Fishing on Facebook. It's a great place it's a group we've got on there. It's a great place to meet other listeners, other anglers, and kind of bounce ideas off each other. Maybe make a fishing buddy or two. It's a good spot to network and connect. Also, go check out our Patreon page. We have a lot of extra content on there with each of our guests. And as we get back into the spring season, we're going to be putting some more updated content on there as well. And that's just a great way to help support this podcast if you do really like the show, as well as get some extra content. So it's just $5 to $10 a month. Yeah, you can do a custom donation, but our tiers are just $5 a month or $10 a month. So super easy, super cheap, and we do really appreciate that. But we're going to talk about speckled trout fishing in the Chesapeake Bay. And as I always say with speckled trout fishing, or really any fishery, just because it's not the area that you necessarily fish doesn't mean there's not a lot that you can learn from someone who fishes that area, or the fishing tactics that are used in that area. I think that's how we can really better ourselves as anglers, is being more diverse and kind of spreading out and learning different tactics, different styles, different areas. So without me talking too much more, we're going to bring on Chris Newsome. What's going on, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Going good. You guys, just full disclosure here. This is our second recording. We got about 20 minutes in, and it dumped us off and deleted everything. So hopefully this one goes through well. This is just, during the pandemic, I think everyone's streaming at night, and it's kind of hard to sometimes. It was recording perfectly up until then, though, so we'll see. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. We'll get through this one, no problem. But give everyone kind of your backstory, how you got into fishing, and how you got into guiding in the area that you're in.
Sure. I've had a rod in my hand since the time I could walk. In high school, I bought my first car with money I made from tying bucktail jigs. I went off to college and got a degree in marine environmental science. After college, started my guiding career and been doing that for the past 20 years.
Awesome.
So I guide about a mile as the crow flies. I keep my boat from where I live, from where I grew up. So it's been lucky to fish the water body that I learned to fish on as a young kid. So
yeah, definitely
been lucky with that. So it's been all good.
Yeah, I feel like you can go to a lot of different areas and book a guide, and it's rare to book a guide that has grown up in that area and fish that area. It seems like guides are transplanted all around, but those are the guys that you want, the guys that have been there their whole life and seen the change and really know it. So that's super cool. Well, tell me a little bit about your speckled trout seasons there. I feel like everywhere you go, it's kind of the fish change. There's better times of year to fish for speckled trout, and there's times that aren't as good. And so, kind of take us through your seasons and what those look like there along the bay.
Sure. So the Chesapeake Bay is the very northern end of the range of the speckled trout. Trout range from the Chesapeake Bay southward into Mexico, and with the bay being the northernmost end of their travels, they tend to be very cyclical in the bay, where they are very dependent on the cold, how cold it gets in the winter. If we get a cold snap of a week of below freezing weather, it really will wipe them out, and we're kind of at ground zero as far as rebuilding the stock. And then if we get several mild winters in a row, the population will kind of grow. And kind of the trend I kind of see is after a cold winter kill, kind of what happens is we'll see good spawns the following year, subsequent years, where we'll have a lot of juvenile speckled trout. But during the winter, they will migrate south to North Carolina, and we don't get them back until the North Carolina population gets rebuilt. And then once that population starts getting big, you start seeing more fish moving into the bay and staying in the bay. I'd say probably 75% of our speckled trout migrate south to North Carolina for the wintertime. I've caught tagged fish from Jacksonville, North Carolina, up my way. They were tagged down there in the winter. Caught them up my way in the summer.
Oh.
I've also done some tagging where I tagged speckled trout. One of them that I tagged in late October, and 2 weeks later is calling the surfeit hatteras. So they do definitely get around. Our speckled trout are definitely more migratory than any other within the range. They've done studies I've seen down in Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and those trout tend to stay just a few miles generally from where they're born.
Yeah.
Our speckled trout tend to get around. And again, I think we start seeing more kind of over winter as well as that population expands. And we're going to be in good shape if we get through this winter without a kill, get through the next couple months. We're going to have a lot of speckled trout and some big ones. One thing we do have when we get numerous consecutive years where those fish survive, we'll see some real big fish, some 10-pound fish will be around this coming year, barring the cold kill. So we have some real trophy fish when times are right. So it can be really good. Talking a little bit about kind of the seasons and everything, we do have some fish that overwinter on the bay.
Yeah.
We tend to see them go up more kind of brackish, tannic kind of waters in the winter times. Elizabeth River, and there's several other areas where you'll have some overwintering fish, Rudy Inlet, and a few other areas as well. But majority of our fish move south during the winter. Gotcha. And then in the spring they will move back up and into the bay. In my particular area, I'm based on the Middle Peninsula of Virginia, which is on the western shore, and it is a finger of land divided by the Rappahannock River to the north, York River to the south. And we tend to get a good push of fish in June. July, as speckled trout are moving into the bay and up the bay. Middle of summer, a lot of those speckled trout have moved up north of me, up to Tangier Sound. And then as things cool down again, later September, October, early November, we'll get another big push of fish as they move south again and work their way south.
Gotcha.
So every year is always different. Some years it'll be good starting into April and be real good all season long in the fall. Other years we'll have waves of a few weeks where it's excellent and then they just disappear. It really depends on the size of that population.
Yeah.
The more fish we see, the more spread out they are and the more available they are throughout the entire year. So I'm excited about the coming season. We're going to be in good shape for specks and the reds. A lot of our juvenile, our puppy drum redfish, shallow water reds, are also driven by the cold winter. Again, we're at the northern end of the range as well. So both of those species, we have real boom or bust seasons here in the bay.
Gotcha. Yeah, it seems like y'all have some of the biggest redfish ever. I would say in the world, being at that northern range.
Yeah, they're some monsters. There's been, as you see, that's one fish, the big bull reds, that there seems to be more numbers of than in the past. I think protecting that breeding stock, where you have the slot and you protect those big fish, that we're seeing. Yeah, a lot more big reds in the bay, and as you head off to the mouth of the bay, in particular out in the mouth of the bay in the ocean, just outside the bay, there's big schools, and out there, I mean, you catch good conditions, and you can find these big schools of bulls just kind of cruising the surface, and a lot of the guys that go out and do that really can find them on a fairly regular basis, kind of looking for a needle in a haystack. They're just, you're just out there,
just cruising,
looking around, trying to find them cruising, and they're not holding on structure or anything else. So, but yeah, there's some big bulls out there.
That's cool. Would you say speckled trout is one of your? Is that a fish that you really desire to pursue? Or is that a fish that you like to fish for yourself? Or
yeah, I mean, I think. in the bay, there's some diehard speckled trout fishermen. That's what they fish for, and that's all they want to catch. And I love my shallow water fishing. It's kind of what I grew up on and have always kind of enjoyed. So yeah, specks. I think they're the prettiest fish in the bay, and I enjoy the hunt and looking for them. So yeah, I definitely like my specks.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoy them too. For the longest time, even into my guiding career, I was so redfish heavy, sight fishing, and I enjoyed speckled trout fishing. But it's like one day I just caught the bug of the speckled trout fishing bug, and I feel like once it gets you, it's hard to shake those fish. It's just a different, at least down where we are, it's a very different style of fishing than what we do for our redfish. And it's a lot of fun. And especially pursuing a large fish and trying to get a big speckled trout is a lot of fun, and it takes time and it takes skill, and I think that's what's so addicting about it. I think that's why people enjoy us talking about speckled trout on podcasts so much, because there's just so much to them and so much you can learn from other people. Real quick, kind of give me just the driving factor for the movement of these fish. Would you say it's really kind of just the cold weather that pushes these fish in and out, or food sources, or what do you think?
Yeah, so there's several driving factors. I mean, temperature, definitely influences these fish. Where, as we spoke a little earlier, the majority will push south to North Carolina
Right.
every winter, and then as it warms, they'll come back up into the bay, and a lot of them will spawn, up in the bay, and then you'll have the little, young of the year fish. They grow really quick. It's amazing, to see these little things and how fast they end up growing. So as your stock grows, we're seeing more up here. But as we talked a little bit, where we find them, wintertime, again, more tannic water,
Yeah.
a little more salinity waters, and they tend not to really hold as much on any type of structure, really. They're more kind of free roaming out you could have them a foot below the surface in 30 feet of water and nothing around really holding them. They're just kind of roaming,
Yeah.
As we head into the warmer months, the shallows kind of become alive. You have a lot of bait in the shallow waters, crabs and all sorts of different minnows, menhaden, juvenile fish and shrimp. And so you got a lot of forage. Kind of the shallows is where the life is in the warm months. So that's where we find our specks, and where I like fishing for them is the warmer months in that shallow water. And we kind of look for you really can find them on a variety of different type of structure. Depends just on the particular location, but of course, grass flats. We used to have a lot more eelgrass in the bay and in my portion of the bay, and a lot of that has really disappeared in recent years. And I always found the eelgrass flats to be superior. We also get widgeon grass, which is another type of submerged aquatic vegetation. And you'll find them some over the widgeon grass. But I always like the eelgrass better, but we don't see the eelgrass as much. It's a little bit cooler weather grass. With the bay kind of seeing a warming trend, you don't see the eelgrass as prolific as it once was. So we'll have the grass flats that we spoke of. One thing I like to analogy I like to use when we're kind of looking at fish, any kind of fishing, but speckled trout as well, is I kind of treat the water body. You're kind of looking for that oasis in the desert, where that small area, concentrated area, where the fish will hold. So you want to go out there and focus your time and increase your odds by locating an area where it's most likely going to hold fish. So we talked grass flats. You also have oyster shell bottoms. oysters in the bay are like 1% of their historic levels. They've been overfished and diseased, and they've been pretty decimated. But you still have some natural shell bottom, and there's some areas where they've restoration sites where they've tried to bring the oysters back. And those restoration sites can be good places to fish. Some of them as well will have like oyster reef balls for the oysters to kind of grow on, and that could add some habitat as well. So a lot of times points, areas where you're going to get moving water along as you come up on a flat near a channel edge. Anything kind of out of the ordinary, and kind of looking for a combination of structure a lot can as well. Sometimes you might have a pier, and then you might have some shell bottom, a little grass flat, and you get all this stuff together, and it'll be good likely places for the fish to congregate.
Right on.
But yeah, there's some areas where you're like, man, why do these fish hold here? And they just do. And, a lot of it's just time on the water and figuring it out. But, there's some places where I'm like, man, why is this spot so productive? Or, and it's kind of hard to figure sometimes. But there's definitely things that the fish see and everything. So a lot of it's just put in that time, and you can learn a lot. We'll talk a little bit about this kind of live chumming technique that I use, but it really shows you a lot and teaches you a lot about fish and where they hold and what causes them to hold there and everything else. But any kind of structure. We also in the bay have some what we call iron ore bottom. This is kind of hard, rocky, fossilized shell. There's a meteor that hit the bay millions of years ago, and it kind of fossilized this shell, and there's this irony, I guess maybe material from the meteor, but it's all kind of fused together. Most of the bay is just sand and mud, but this iron ore type bottom will give you some hard bottom structure, again, for that'll attract life and attract your predator fish.
Yeah.
So we're just looking for areas that are gonna attract bait and in turn attract predators. Is kind of what we're looking to do.
How important there is current? Because I know here in North Carolina, it's like we've got multiple different types of areas to target these trout, and like where I am in Wilmington, everything's current based. We're fishing in the fall. When the water's warmer. If you're not in the current, there's not going to be trout there feeding. But as it gets cooler and the fish will move into these out of current areas to burn less calories, like boat basins and canals and stuff, because in my area we don't have big bays that are kind of out of the current. Those fish will start to sit off dock pilings and whatnot out of the current and feed just as well that way. But it seems like if there's good current, they want it. If there's not, how does that play for you up there in the bay? Are you looking for current oftentimes, or are you kind of just fishing it when you have it?
Current seems the area I fish. You in the spring, as they're migrating up the bay, they definitely seem to really key on areas where you're going to have increased current. Again, like points and stuff like that. Then once they get to where it seems like if we head later into the season and then into the fall again as well, they're not so staged on relying on current as much. It's more structure, having moving water is the key. I find, they particularly don't like, up here anyway, really ripping hard, strong currents. Having that moving water is definitely a deciding factor. Up this way, the biggest factor though is, fishing low light. I'm kind of talking about the warmer months in the shallower water, and they're really, really kind of definitely key. Time of day is the biggest deciding factor. I'd pick that over tide anytime, over
Okay.
current, flow, or anything else. There's places, I can work throughout the day where I know, I can fish here when the current's moving here, and if it's slack here, I can go somewhere else where it's going to be moving again, and so I can kind of work around current and tide. But time of day here is the biggest factor.
Okay.
One thing, fishing mornings generally, particularly in the springs and early summer, mornings are more productive than afternoon evenings. They are what we call a batch spawner, where they spawn multiple times throughout spring and summer. And they do their spawning in the late afternoon, evening time frame. So when they're spawning, they're not keyed on feeding as much, which I think is why you don't have as much success in the spring and early summer in the afternoons. Fall, excuse me. In the fall, the fish tend to be more aggressive, and they will feed in mornings and afternoons, and basically throughout the day. It seems they're trying to fatten up, bulk up, because they know winter's coming, and they're a little more aggressive. So, if I had one thing I tell my clients is we want to really target that low light time of day for the specks in our area. They really are light sensitive.
Yeah, I see that same trend even here in the summertime. If I want to catch speckled trout, I mean, I'll get some throughout the day randomly targeting redfish in deeper water, but that morning bite, go throw top water or something just subsurface first thing in the morning, I'll catch trout for the first hour, and then I'm kind of usually done with trout in the summer. But in the fall, I think it's exactly what you're saying. It's colder. They're trying to get as many calories as they can, and they'll eat throughout the day really well. So it's cool to just see how these fish trends, no matter where you are, they're the same species. But let's talk a little bit. We kind of got into spots, but maybe let's talk about it. Do you see a difference in where you're catching your big speckled trout as opposed to your numbers of speckled trout, or is it kind of more just catch a bunch of fish, hopefully some of them are big?
There definitely are spots where you're going to find bigger fish, and spots where you might catch numerous small fish, and sometimes there might be a little more of a mix.
Yeah.
And where we are, we kind of can catch kind of a mixed bag. I call our Chesapeake shallow water slam of speckled trout, striped bass, and redfish. And sometimes you're fishing a spot, yeah, you'll catch all three back to back, kind of mixed together.
That's cool. That's super cool.
But yeah, if you're really serious about targeting big fish, the big fish, I'd say, tend to like a little shallower water a lot of times than the smaller fish will. So don't be scared to fish the shallow water if you're really targeting that trophy fish. But
what do you think pulls them into that shallow water? Do you think it's access to bait, less work to find food to eat, or what is it?
Yeah, I think it's bait, and also I think they're not as big fish tend to be a little more solitary and smaller trout seem to school up in bigger schools, and the big fish can be more solitary, and also I don't think they're as skittish as a small fish. They're not worried about an osprey diving and picking them off or whatever.
Right. That makes sense for sure.
In the warm months, the life's in the shallows, so that's where your fish are at. But again, that's kind of, it seems once that sun gets up and gets high in the sky, those fish will kind of start moving out of the shallower water, head to a little deeper water. So again, that's a reason you want to get out there early.
Yeah, definitely. It's always nice to be heading in when everyone else is hitting the water. I know that up in your area it can be busy, and it's fun to have caught your fish and be back at the dock as all the joy boaters are getting out there on the water and already be done with your day. But
oh yeah.
Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about, when we had first started talking about doing this podcast together, I said, what are some topics, that maybe you're interested in or that we could talk about? And you talked about live chumming for speckled trout. And I feel like a lot of my buddies I fished with down in South Florida do a lot of live chumming, and even in Georgia. But it's something that you don't hear much of. I don't even know about in your area, you might, but in North Carolina, there's not many people that I know of that are actually, live chumming on a regular basis. And I think it's just kind of a lost art in this area. So I'm excited to kind of pick your brain about it. So take me through kind of what that looks like and how you use that to effectively target these fish and maybe make it even more productive.
Yeah, so, we'll kind of go back when I was 15. We took a trip to Southwest Florida, snook fishing with a guide, and, he cast net some pilchards and live chumming with them for snook. And I was like, man, this probably work back home with menhaden, so came back and kind of been doing it ever since. And to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't have started guiding and wouldn't be, a success in my area if I hadn't kind of applied that technique to our local fishery. It's something I do, when we're every single day from end of May through October. I'll do this, and a lot of people that have never seen it or never tried it, seen it in action, they hear the word chumming and they think, well, you're just sitting anchored up waiting for something to happen. But this is a very active and visual form of fishing. And it tells me as a guide a lot as far as conditions and what's happening, and lets me read the water and put my people on fish, because as a guide you're kind of a lot of times the odds are stacked against you. You might be the weather and the tide and this, that, and the other. You're not always out during perfect conditions. So you want to, you might have some clients and this is their one day out of the whole year to fish.
Yeah.
So you want to try to increase your odds and, make sure your clients catch fish and have a successful day. So live chumming is something that lets me do that. Basically, what I do, start of the trip, I'll throw my net. Ideally, we'll catch some peanut bunker, juvenile menhaden, and load the live wells with the menhaden. In the bay, historically, menhaden have been our primary forage fish that all of our predators feed on. Their numbers have declined over the years. There's not as many as when I was a kid by far. And some of that could be due to we got a big commercial fishery, purseine fishery in the bay for menhaden, where they fly around in these spotter planes, these airplanes. They can see the large schools of menhaden from the air, and they take some bigger ships out and launch these two smaller purse boats and circle of schools and then vacuum into the hull of the big ship. And so it's a very effective means of fishing. They can really easily locate these big schools and target these fish. So it's kind of a topic of controversy in Virginia. Virginia is basically the only state that still allows this to happen. So it's the conundrum of the whole issue is that it's a localized kind of depletion where there can be plenty menhaden along the entire East Coast, but here locally in Virginia portion of the Chesapeake Bay, they get hammered real hard. So we have they're targeting mainly the adult menhaden, age 2 and older mainly, but I think it does impact. We just don't see the number of juvenile menhaden as well as we used to. We don't see the big menhaden or the juveniles as much. But the peanut bunker, the juvenile menhaden, basically will use the shallows as nursery areas during the warmer months of the year. So menhaden spawn out in the ocean, and early spring is when the March, say, is when you see when they spawn primarily out in the ocean, and then the fry will travel into the bay, and the juveniles will be in the shallow water through late spring, summer, early fall. Gotcha. Then when the water cools, they move out to the open water again. So I rely on those peanut bunker, the juvenile menhaden, and also I will, if I see some larger menhaden, I'll throw the net and catch them. I've caught, speckled trout, 20-inch speckled trout with a 10-inch menhaden hanging out of his mouth, and he's still eating, eating lures. Oh, yeah. So it's surprising how those, a 20-inch fish can target something half its size, But so the game again is load the live wells, and we'll pull up to a likely spot, and then I'll toss over a few handfuls, and the bait will spread out. And starts. The nice thing with menhaden is when you throw out an individual fish, it travels right on the surface, and you can actually see them making a little V wake when it's calm. And so they'll start swimming around, and then you're looking for feeding activity of your predator fish. You can pull up to a spot. Sometimes, we'll be pulling into a spot, and there might have been a boat there fishing, and they're leaving, and they're like, man, we haven't had any luck, nothing happening, so they pick up and leave, and I toss out some bait, and, within a few seconds, boom, fish are crashing the surface. And, there was fish there. They just weren't turned on. The tide wasn't right or whatever. They just weren't in a feeding mood. But you get that live bait in the water, and all of a sudden, you see that surface activity. And, so it's a real visual thing where you're seeing the baits being smashed and thrown in the air and everything, and you're sight casting to where you see that activity happening. So it gives my clients, confidence that there are fish around. Yeah. Lets them know. I get a lot of fly fishermen. Right. So I get a lot of fly fishermen out, and with speckled trout, if you're fishing a flat or something, they could be spread out. They could be here or there. So by using this technique, it lets my clients know where the fish at, gives them something to cast to, so they're not just out there flailing away blind casting the fly, not knowing where the fish are at and everything else. Yeah. One neat thing too is once you get used to it, you can determine the type of fish that are hitting the bait. Like speckled trout will kind of make a little bit of a sucking pop when they hit the bait, whereas striped bass will make more of a tail slap. Mm-hmm. And then you might have Spanish mackerel that are thrashing real fast through the bait. So you can really tell the type of species, and like I say, if you wanted to target trout, you can actually tell, hey, that's a trout over there that just hit, or hey, that's a striper, cool. and then make your sight cast to that particular fish. And one thing with trout too, when they feed. That's a little different than striper, is that trout will come up and hit that bait, and then he'll settle right back in that same vicinity, whereas a striper will hit that bait and then keep moving a lot of times. So with the trout, you see that trout pop, get a cast in there, even if you're a little late getting your cast into where you see the activity, he's still going to be right there a lot of times. Cool. That's cool. So it's kind of cool to tell the different type fish. The reds will make more of a deeper boil, so you kind of can read the water and tell what kind of fish you got around. And there's times where you pull into a spot and you think the fish should be right here, and then the bait scatters, 100 yards down the shore, and then you start seeing pow pow, there they are, on down there. So then you move on down where those fish are at, and you're not wasting time fishing unproductive water. Yeah, definitely. So it lets me lets me quickly determine what we have going on. Sometimes I might have some novice anglers on the boat or whatever. So you pull into a place, and if you didn't have the bait, I might have to sit there, wait, just to see, hey, if are there fish here or not, So with this technique, I'm able to quickly tell, hey, we pull into a spot and we don't see activity within a couple minutes, we're up and moving. Like, hey, they're not here. We're moving to the next spot. So it allows me to fish a lot more spots over a shorter period of time. If I'm not finding fish, and then sometimes you hit this huge school of fish and you can sit there for hours and whale on them.
Right.
But there are days where the fish aren't very active. You might have had a front blow through, and big high pressure sitting over you, and the fish aren't feeding aggressively. And even with the bait, you might get those fish to turn on for a minute and then they shut right back off. And then, you don't see any activity, like, all right, hey, we're going to pick up and move on to the next spot. And you move on to the next spot, it's the same thing. You catch them for a minute and then they shut off. But if you didn't have the bait, you'd be out there getting blanked.
Right.
I mean, it really, it can save your day a lot of times. And you learn a lot. You learn a lot, that you wouldn't otherwise learn. You're kind of attuned to the different type of baits that are around, and everything else. I know which week in July the bay anchovies are going to disappear, or I know when in June the adult thread herring are going to leave, or you learn kind of what current and tide are you going to find, some silver sides at this one area, or what wind direction are you going to find some peanut bunker in this creek or whatnot. So you really get attuned to all the different kind of life around. And sometimes you throw your net and you catch some oddball fish. You might catch a striped burrfish or a harvest fish, or a hog choker or something weird. So you get to see all these different type of fish you normally wouldn't see.
Yeah.
So it's entertaining and educational for the clients, and it's exciting. Lets you throw. You could throw top water, of course, at them, and throw top water throughout the day more than you would normally be able to, because you're getting these fish turned on, and so it's a great way to fish top water, great way to throw the fly at these fish, and it's exciting. It gets you going. When you see this going on, it kind of gets your blood pumping to see that activity and that action on the surface and everything. So it's definitely a tool that like I say, I try to, when I'm fishing, trout or striper or reds or whatever in the shallows. I always try to find some bait, and it really is a key to success in my area.
Okay.
And tells me a lot as a guide, as far as reading what's there, and letting me know, hey, we're going to hold in this spot because there's fish here, or hey, we're going to pick up and go. We're not seeing anything, and so we really can focus, maximize our time on the water each day.
For sure. Now, tell me this: do you really just see? I mean, are menhaden? I've got two questions here. Really, are menhaden really the main focus of what you're going to use? Will you use? I don't even know if you have mullet, but will you use other bait fish? And also, are there certain types of areas that work real well? I know we're going to have people thinking like, all right, I'm fishing a lot of deep, windy creeks. Is this going to be a productive way to do that, or big open bays, or stuff like that? So, first question is, can you do it with different types of bait? Second question is what kind of areas are the best for it?
Right. So, menhaden are prime. They're a real oily fish. Everything likes eating them. And historically in our area, they're abundant. They haven't been as abundant in recent years, but again, they'll be cyclical. Some years we'll have more than others, but we don't see as much as we did. So I do, when they're scarce, I have to try to round up something else if I can't find, menhaden. So, I'll sometimes, I'll use little bay anchovies or little silver sides, thread herring, or we get some mullet, but we don't get a lot of mullet. So we don't get enough mullet to really use them as live chum. We in the late summer, fall, we're seeing more and more shrimp in the bay.
Yeah.
There's actually some guys that are starting to commercial fish for the shrimp in late fall, winter off Virginia Beach.
Cool.
Where there didn't used to be a fishery there. So you can actually, if you can catch a bunch of shrimp, I've used shrimp before, but basically, menhaden are prime, but if I'm in a tight spot, I'll use other stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, like I was saying too, is there the spot selection? I mean,
right.
Is there some areas that it doesn't work well?
You don't. One advantage of it is too. I might have some fly fishermen on the boat, and we might hit a spot that has a lot of current and might be 20 feet deep. Might be fishing a deeper spot, and on my depth finder, I can mark some fish down there in the structure, but can't reach them with the fly. So with the bait, I can get that bait in the water, and then it brings those fish right to the surface.
Wow.
So you're able to, again, you're able, especially with fly anglers, you're able to bring those fish right up, and they can throw poppers at them. So it's, it really, as long as the fish are there, it really will work in any type
Gotcha.
location.
Yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. Yeah, as you're sharing all this, my wheels are turning of like, where can I start to do this? And I've thought about the live chumming before, and I've done it in small ways, but really not to where I've made it part of my program.
Yeah, like you say, it's not something that is really done on the Mid-Atlantic. Again, I borrowed it from Florida, because like you say, they do it down there quite often. But it definitely works in my area, and is a big key to my success and putting clients on fish and everything else. And like I say, it's exciting. It's exciting to
definitely
see that activity. Just to watch the fish feed is fun.
Yeah.
It's get your blood pumping.
Yeah, I agree. It is for sure, and I think it's something that people are going to take from this podcast and be able to apply in a lot of scenarios here. I mean, there's definitely some areas here that I'm thinking of where I'm like, God, there's already so much bait there. But then there's other areas, where the current's a little bit slower, and I know it's going to be a productive outing for sure.
Right, and a lot of times, when you have a big pot of bait, we might be fishing a spot and we see a school of menhaden or bay anchovies or whatever, and there's nothing feeding on them, but I throw in some, individual fish, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 they're getting picked
Gotcha.
off. And
when
cool.
bait's
in a big ball, the reason the bait kind of schools up is for protection. And when it's in a big ball, predators have a hard time getting at it. But if it's individual fish, bait fish, minnows swimming along the surface, they pick them off in a heartbeat. Just because you see a big school of bait and it's not getting busted on, doesn't mean there's not fish in that area.
Gotcha.
It's pretty something it's kind of unusual to see, because you think, well, if these fish are here, why aren't they hitting that bait, but they just can't get at it because it's, unless it's a big school of predators breaking up that bait ball,
Yeah, the bait's going to win.
You know, the bait's going to win.
Makes
and
sense.
So yeah, it's just that individual, bait here or there swimming on its own is when they get picked off. That definitely is something that you notice, and like you say, you learn a lot. You're always, I think you become more attuned to to what's in the water and what's around and all that kind of stuff, and you get to know, from a distance you can tell by where the water's moving. Oh, that's a school of silver sides, or that's a school of thread herring, or you can tell the different types of bait and everything else just by the way they look on the water and all that kind of stuff. And I think it helps you become a better angler in general. But it's like I say, it's definitely a tool in my box that helps me do my job on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it's visual and exciting to see.
For sure. Well, man, I think that's such a great tip, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. We're already at about 50 minutes here, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And like I said, you guys, we're going to have Chris on again for sure to talk about, there's so much fishing that goes on up there, the striper fishing, the red fishing, and whatnot. So we are going to slide onto Patreon and talk a little bit more about trout fishing and some of the lures I think that Chris likes to use when targeting these fish. But we're going to wrap it up here unless Chris has anything else that you want to share that you felt like maybe you missed out on. If not, no worries at all, and we'll finish it up here.
No, I think we're good.
Sweet.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks
for sure.
Thanks so much.
Definitely. Well, guys, thanks for checking out another episode of Eastern Current. And like I said, head on over to Patreon if you do want to continue this podcast a little bit and learn a little bit more from Chris. Thank y'all. Later.